Morning students. So today we are going to start with the lecture of anesthesia series, that is spinal anesthesia. We have already covered the lectures regarding the general anesthesia. Spinal anesthesia is a type of regional anesthesia, and this is the most common technique which we are using for the infraumbilical surgeries in our setup. After seeing the learning objectives, you should be able to learn all these things which are there on the slides. That is anatomy of spinal cord, physiological effects, indications, contraindications, advantages and disadvantages of the spinal anesthesia, and the complications of the spinal anesthesia. We have already learned about the anatomy of the spine. You have known that there is vertebral column in the back, which is having four type of the curvatures. There are cervical and lumbar convexity, anteriorly called as lordosis, thoracic and sacral kyphosis. The spinal nerves that are emerging from these foraminas of the spinal column, that is 8 cervical, 12 thoracic, 5 lumbar, 5 sacral, and the 1 coccygeal. Total 31 number of pairs they are emerging from the spinal column. The spinal cord, it is a continuation of the brainstem through the foramina of magnum, and it terminates distally in the conus medullaris. There are change in the level of this conus medullaris as the age differences are there. It ends at the lower border of L1 in the adults, whereas it is ending at the upper border of L3 in case of children. So whenever we are giving the spinal anesthesia, we should know the age of the patient and the termination of this conus, because when we are pricking the needle, we should avoid the trauma to the cord. Spinal cord is all you are knowing, that is coverings, pia mater, arachnoid mater, and dura mater from inside out. So these are the multiple layers they are wrapping the spinal cord. It is the most safest structure covered by many things, and mainly the bony cage, that is the vertebral column from the outside. So there are some spaces through which we can enter through the intervertebral spaces, and we can have an entry into these spaces. For giving the spinal anesthesia, this is the most important space, that is the subarachnoid space, which is lying below the arachnoid mater and contains the CSF. In this CSF, we are giving the or inserting the local anesthetic drug, and we are achieving the anesthesia. So there are spinal nerves which are coming through this CSF, and there are some vessels also, blood vessels also, which are supplying the spinal cord. This subarachnoid space ends at the S2 level. So before giving the spinal anesthesia, you should always know what is the circulation of the CSF, because we are administrating the drug into the CSF, and the flow of the drug is determined by the flow of the CSF. This is already covered in your anatomy and physiology. That is, choroid plexus in the lateral ventricle secretes the CSF. Through the foramina of Monero, it comes into the third ventricle. Then through the aqueduct of Sylvius into fourth ventricle, then foramina Luschke and Magendie, and then it comes into the subarachnoid space. The CSF reabsorption occurs in the arachnoid villi. So there are continuously current, that is flowing of the CSF, that is flow of the CSF from the lateral ventricle, and the continuous reabsorption through the arachnoid villi. And this current or this flow helps your local anesthetic to spread upward and downward into the CSF and blocking the spinal nerves. August Bayer in 1885 first determined this technique of the spinal anesthesia. He himself gave the spinal, in his spinal column and got the effects, various effects that are seen on him. So you should know what is the autonomical nervous system and how this spinal blockade will appear when the spinal anesthesia is given, that is the local anesthetic drug is given into this CSF. So sympathetic fibers that are arising from the T1 to L2 segments and the parasympathetic fibers that are craniosacral segments in the nerves, that is the cranial nerve components of what the parasympathetic fibers is the third nerve, seventh nerve, ninth and 10th vagus. And the sacral fibers are arising from the S2, S3, S4. So whenever we are giving the spinal anesthesia, there is always a major sympathetic blockade of the T1 to L2 segments because we are giving it at the level of the L1, L2, L3. This level is there. So there is major blockade of the sympathetic system and the sacral system of the parasympathetic is always blocked. And the vagus is spared, but if the spinal drug reaches the higher level, then there can be chance of blocking of the vagus nerve also. What is the mechanism of action of this drug or the spinal anesthesia? The site of action for the neuraxial blockade is the subarachnoid space, that is the nerve roots emerged into the or bathing into the CSF. The blockade of the posterior nerve root, somatic, sensory and visceral sensations is also there, and blockade of the anterior nerve root fibers that prevent the efferent motor and the autonomic outflow. So all these three types of the blockades are seen whenever you are giving the spinal anesthesia. There is a specific order of the blocking of these nerves. Autonomic and the temperature fibers, they are blocked first, then pain fibers are blocked, then touch fibers are blocked, and then somatic motor fibers are blocked. This differentiation of the blockade or the order of blocking of the nerve also determines the specific type of the anesthesia. That is, we can have the specific labor analgesia without the motor blockade if the drug level and the drug concentration is changed. Then how to identify that specific level of the spinal anesthesia? For that, we determine the dermatomal levels. As we all know, the sensory supply of all these dermatomes, T4 is the level or is the dermatome that supplies over the area of the nipple. T5 is the inframammary fold. Then T6 is the xiphoid. Then T10 is the umbilical level. L1 is the groin level, and S2 to S4 is the perineum level. So we can have the differentiation of the blockade or the specific level of this blockade if we give the specific amount and the concentration of the local anesthetic into the cerebrospinal fluid. So after giving the spinal anesthesia, what are the different changes that are seen into the systems? First, cardiovascular changes. There is always a hypotension because of the venous and arterial dilatation due to the sympathetic blockade. As there is a vasodilatation, so there will be less venous return to the heart, and thus the cardiac output is also decreased and the blood pressure is decreased. Then there is a bradycardia. Blockade of the cardiac sympathetic fibers leads to decrease in the heart rate. Effects on the gastrointestinal system. There may be nausea and vomiting, which is caused by the unopposed parasympathetic activity. As I have already mentioned, that there is sympathetic blockade at all the levels, and vagal action is sometimes blocked if there is a higher level. Otherwise, there will be higher vagal activity causing nausea and vomiting. Again, but this activity or this unopposed parasympathetic vagal activity also helps for the small contraction, which provides the excellent operative conditions when we are administering the spinal anesthesia. Considering the urinary tract manifestation, as the bladder is supplied by both parasympathetic, that is S2 to S4 segments, and the sympathetic, Both are blocked in case of spinal anesthesia. So the control of the bladder function will result in the urinary retention. Let us see what are the advantages of this spinal anesthesia and why it is so popular. Because it is very low cost effective. There is decrease in the blood loss as there is pooling of the blood inside the veins, less metabolic derangements. There is no polypharmacy as we are administering the single drug. There is better, his anesthesia is very good for the severe respiratory compromise because we are not handling the respiratory component at all during the spinal. It allows very good verbal communication, so patient is comfortable, patient is not unconscious when we are administering the spinal anesthesia. So we can have a verbal communication and the symptoms that are detected or the derangement like hypoglycemia or the patient's neurologically impairment, they are easily detected in case of spinal anesthesia when we are giving this type of anesthesia. For good example of this is the TURP syndrome, which is seen after the prostatectomy, that is the transurethral resection of the prostate. For this surgery, the spinal anesthesia allows us with the good verbal communication, early detection of the symptoms of the TURP syndrome. Then post-operative analgesia. This is the best analgesia forever, which is given with the specific regional technique in very low cost and with a single drug. Pain component, because we are completely blocking the pain fibers, this is the best analgesic. And again, it avoids the complications of the general anesthesia, because for the general anesthesia, we have to compromise the airway, we have to put the tube, we have to put the LMA, and for all this, there is always a sympathetic response which is seen. Laryngoscopy we have to have. There are always a chance of aspiration when we are putting the tube. In cases of difficult airway, again there is a problem. So, considering all these things, this is the best technique for the anesthesia. Now let us see what are the disadvantages. Why we are unable to give the spinal anesthesia for all conditions. The local anesthetics, they have a specific time for their action. As this is the reversible action of the local anesthetic, once they are metabolized, the action wears off. So spinal anesthesia has a specific duration. And hence, either we have to give the continuous spinal anesthesia with catheter insertion for the prolonged surgeries. And in those cases, the awake patient may have the discomfort. So for prolonged surgeries, this is the technique which is little bit discomforting. Then there is always a potential for the nerve damage as we are near the spinal cord. If our level is changed or we are not able to pierce the needle till the CSF properly, in case some anatomical changes are there considering the cord, then there is always a chance of injury to the cord. Then introduction of the infection in CSF. Yes, there is little chance of infection in CSF, which if we are not taking good precautions prior before giving the spinal, we are not considering the proper sterilization. Post-operative leg weakness and urinary retention. As there is a motor blockade also, so there will be always a leg weakness and urinary retention due to the, as I have already mentioned, for the sympathetic and parasympathetic blockade of the bladder. Let us see what are the specific indications for the spinal anesthesia. This is the primary anesthetic technique in the lower abdominal procedures, mainly the LSCS, that is lower cesarean section. Inguinal hernia repair, urogenital surgeries, rectal and lower extremity surgeries. This is the best technique for the lower extremity surgeries. Spinal anesthesia is a preferable technique in case of geriatric age group for orthopedic, vascular and the urological procedures. Then again, this is the best technique for the obstetric patients with the full stomach for their urogenital procedures. and I have already mentioned the lower segment cesarean section. But there are some absolute contraindications for the spinal anesthesia. First and foremost is the patient's refusal. If patient is not willing of piercing a needle in his back, then this is the contraindication for giving the spinal anesthesia. Then infection at the site of the injection. If we are inserting the needle through that infection, that I already mentioned, the complication or the problem with the spinal is, it is infection, it may go into the CSF, causing the meningitis. So this is again a absolute contraindication. Then coagulopathy and the bleeding diastasis. Because the spinal anesthesia or inserting a needle into the spinal column is a blind procedure. There may be vessel which may come in between, and if the coagulopathy or the bleeding diastasis is there, then there are always chance of piercing this vessel and causing the blood clot or causing the hematoma inside the spinal column. And after this hematoma, it may have a compression effect and there may be a permanent neurological damage to the patient, causing the Koda-Equina syndrome or the hematoma-related neuropathy. So this is the very dangerous complication because of the spinal anesthesia. So coagulopathy and the bleeding diastasis is the absolute contraindication for giving the spinal anesthesia. Then third is the low fixed cardiac output state like constrictive pericarditis, cardiac tamponade, severe mitral stenosis and severe aortic stenosis. Because all these cases, the patients do not tolerate a small amount of hypotension, and this hypotension is the important physiological effect after giving the spinal anesthesia. So all these conditions where the heart cannot compensate for the little decrease in the blood pressure, this is the absolute contraindication for the spinal. Similarly, severe hypovolemia, again because of the hypotension, it is also an absolute contraindication. Raised intracranial tension, as we are doing the LP, that is lumbar puncture. In case of giving the spinal, we are withdrawing the CSF and we are inserting the drug. So because of this, if there is raised ICT, there is a chance of pulling. That is the herniation of the brainstem or the structures down because of this LP. And so raised ICT is again an absolute contraindication for the spinal anesthesia. Relative contraindications, sepsis like infection, bacteremia in the patients, high grade fever, uncooperative patient, again the spinal deformity, if there is a congenital traumatic or post surgery, post spine surgery deformity is there, here the spinal anesthesia becomes very difficult, so it may be a relative contraindication. Severe anemia because of the effects on the heart, again can be a relative contraindication for giving the spinal anesthesia. Now let us see the technique of giving spinal anesthesia. This is best if you come into the OT and see by yourself the technique of giving the spinal. But for theoretical purpose, I will mention the equipments and the drugs. Spinal needle, the smalls, there are 2-3 types of the needle which come. Some are the pencil point needles and the some beveled needles. We here use the beveled needle, that is the Quincke's type of the needle. But Whitcare type of the needle, that is the pencil point needle also comes, and that needle have the little chance of the post-dural puncture headache. Again, the smaller gauge needles, they again also have the low chance of post-dural puncture headache. The spinal needles, they come from 22 gauge to 29 gauge. We routinely use in our setup the 25 gauge of the needle and the 23 gauge of the needle. For old age, maybe we use the 23 because it is easy to pierce through the calcified ligaments. But for all other patients, we generally use the 25 gauge number of the needle. Which are the local anesthetics that are given through the spinal? These are the lignocaine 5% heavy, bupivacaine 0.5% heavy, Ropivacaine 0.5% isobaric form. Routinely, we use this bupivacaine most commonly as the agent for giving the spinal anesthesia. With the lignocaine, there are some chances of transient neurological blockade or the problems. So, the bupivacaine is the most common agent which is used for giving the spinal anesthesia. So these are some needles. This is how we give the position for the giving the spinal anesthesia. It can be given in the sitting position at the level of the L3. So how to identify the L3 segment? So these are the methods. You have to palpate the highest point of the iliac crest, and from two highest point of two sides, the which line passes is called as the Tuffer's line, and below that Tuffer's line is the space which is the L3 L4 space, or the lower border of the L3 vertebra and the upper border of the L4 vertebra. So at that level you will have to palpate for the space. You will not feel the bony prominence at that level, and below that you will have to insert the needle. For giving the proper spinal anesthesia, either you will have to put the patient into the sitting position or the lateral position. Whenever you are giving the lateral position, see that the spinal column is in a straight line. For that, you will have to bend the knees and put the patient's at it as a flexion in case of hip joint, flexion at the level of shoulder joint, and put a small pillow below the head so that there is completely straight line of the patient's spinal column, and it is very easy to give the spinal anesthesia. This is how assistant should hold the spine at the navel of the neck and the legs so that you can easily give the spinal anesthesia. This is the same procedure as you do for the lumbar puncture. You will have to first do the LP and give the drug inside the spinal column. So which are the segments you are now piercing? Skin, subcutaneous tissue, then interspinous ligament, then ligamentum flava, then dura mater, and then the subarachnoid mater. And you will enter into the subarachnoid space where there is a CSF. You will have to aspirate that CSF very little, one mark from that syringe when the patient is given the spinal. Why we need the monitoring of that may occur due to the exaggerated physiological responses. First and foremost, as we have already seen, is the hypotension. So for that, you have to manage the patient with proper oxygen supply, IV fluids as a bolus, that is 500 ml to 1000 ml. Then leg raising, as we have already seen that there is venous pooling or the venous return is decreased. So raising the legs will also help to maintain the venous return. Then use of vasopressor drugs like ephedrine or mephentermine. This cause the vasoconstriction and help for maintenance of the blood pressure. The second complication which can be seen is the decrease in the pulse rate or the heart rate below 60. So if it goes below the 50 beats per minute, then you will have to give the injection atropine. This is the anticholinergic which we can use and give them for the bradycardia. This is the drug of choice for the treatment of bradycardia. If there is no response, then you can also have the drug that is epinephrine or the adrenaline, which can be given as a 50 to 100 microgram of the bolus IV. The third most very rarely seen complication of the spinal anesthesia is the total spinal block. When the level of the block exceeds above T1 involving the cervical segments of the cord, then it is called as the total spinal block. There may be nausea, vomiting, difficulty in breathing, hypotension, and bradycardia, which are very severe. And the patient may complain of loss of voice. The management is adequate airway and ventilation, give the 100% oxygen, and immediately do the intubation. Maintain the circulation with the IV fluids, vasopressor drugs like dopamine, phenylephrine, etc. And maintain the hemodynamic stability of the patient as well as the airway maintenance. The other two complications which I have already mentioned are the urinary retention and the nausea and vomiting. Again, if the blood pressure is very good control, then this nausea vomiting may decrease. There is no specific drug treatment which is required for the nausea vomiting in case of spinal anesthesia. And there are some post-operative complications with the spinal. The most common complication which is seen after the spinal anesthesia as a post-operative complication is a post-dural puncture headache. This is a typical headache of the spinal anesthesia which occurs 12 to 72 hours post-operatively. The cause of this headache is the loss of CSF through the dural puncture, which decreases the SCP, and there is a traction on the dura and the blood vessels. So they are causing the throbbing type of the headache, which is bilateral, frontal or retroorbital or the occipital headache, and increases in sitting and relieves in the lying down position. So the traction will increase in the sitting and there will be less traction during the lying down position. So this is the tractional type of the headache because of loss of CSF. And occipital or retroorbital is the typical position of this headache. And it occurs 72 till 72 hours. Management is, there can be prevention of this headache with the use of smaller size of needle, as I have mentioned. That is, if we are using the 25 gauge of the needle, the chances of this headache are less. Again, pencil point needle, they are also having the small number of cases with the headache. Then prevention of the dehydration. Adequate amount of IV fluid if you are giving to the patient, then also the chances of or the incidence of this headache is less. Then how to treat this headache? Give the recumbent position, head low position slightly, then analgesics, IV or oral fluid administration, avoid the dehydration, treat the dehydration. Then IV caffeine is also helpful. And the last treatment for this headache, if with the above major treatment is not relieved, then you can also give the epidural blood patch for sealing that dural puncture and avoiding the headache or treating the headache. The delayed complications of the spinal anesthesia, which are very, very rare, but you should mention, are the transient neurological symptoms, cranial nerve disturbances, visual and auditory disturbances, paralysis of sixth cranial nerve, backache, spinal hematoma, and if infection occurs, then meningitis or arachnoiditis. Spinal hematoma is also there if you are not properly maintaining the contraindications of the spinal anesthesia. Backache, because of the relaxation of the ligaments during the anesthesia, there may be a complaint of backache later on, but it is not as due to the spinal anesthesia. It is because the patient's other problems also.